Welcome to Small Talk with RainKraft. I'm Subha, a leadership and executive coach.
And I'm Hasita, a marketing strategist.
We're just two people who love to talk
and love to learn.
And this is us being curious about the world around us.
Join us.
So Subha, it's time for New Year, New Me. I think we're less than a month away from 2023. And in some ways, this has been our favorite time of the year. How do you think the book that we are planning to write is going to come along next year? Do you see a future for it?
I'm guessing that's why the two of us didn't go to Bangalore Lit Fest this year, because we're going there next year with our book, right, Asita?
As published authors. Yes. Yeah. This is a moment when we want to manifest it, because I just wonder, is there the time for it, first of all? And somehow we do this exercise every year wherein we talk about what we want for the year ahead. And we talk about it in very articulated terms. It's not just a wishy-washy conversation. Usually it brings up interesting things, and we've seen a lot of growth happen because of that. But this year for me, somehow it's been feeling a little uncomfortable, and I'm feeling a little lost, and I just kind of wonder if I've done what I set out to do. If some amorphous goal that I'd set for myself, I saw myself as a very successful business person, and that's come to pass. Why am I not feeling it? And then it makes me question the process, that why bother? I mean, it's a year. It'll pan out the way it's meant to. What do you think about that?
No, I think quite timely, because I've also been just kind of reflecting on the year and thinking about, as we, like you said, end up doing goals for the coming year. And I feel like I want to do it a bit differently too. So let's deep dive, shall we?
For sure.
I think one thing I realized, that the minute I thought of goals, I have a very straightforward way of bucketing it, right? There is the personal life and there's the work life. And so the goals that I tend to write also just speak to two specific aspects of everything that's going on around me. And maybe that's where the answer to your dilemma also lies, that the satisfaction of a good year is not really jumping at you, because you're looking at two sets of goals, whereas you've accomplished so many other things.
I think you're right, because the minute you said it, my immediate reflex was, have I? So maybe it is true that I haven't thought about it in those terms at all.
Yeah, I feel like one good useful tool that we can use when we sit down for the coming year is to expand that world in which we set our goals, right? The tool that comes to mind is really the Wheel of Life, and simply because it makes you think about the various other parts of your life which make you whole. So there's definitely your career and the finances associated with it. And actually, I would even call them out as two different things, right? There's career and what you do, and then there is your finances and your financial success, independence, comfort. There's family, home. There is, friends and relationships. There's your physical health. There's mental health. There's spiritual and emotional health, right? There is, what are you doing for enjoyment and leisure and just, happiness. So many parts of us which I feel we've been kind of excluding from the goal setting process. What do you say?
I actually hadn't thought of it on those lines at all, because like you said, it was always, okay, I'm this person at work and then I'm this person outside of work. And if something doesn't go very well in either of those contexts, then it's probably, in fact, last 2-3 months, there has been a period of, just laying low, taking it slow, doing lesser than I did before. And it felt good at the time. But I think I see now where this discomfort is coming from, because in that sense, I've done a disservice to the work goal in the interest of the wellness goal, right? And because I had not seen it that way, there's that little bit of discomfort in terms of how I'm looking at it, perhaps.
Like when I look back at the year and I say, okay, work goals were XYZ and I hit them, and there were periods of lull or periods where I chose not to do something, which, we've talked about, like, took a back step on the whole content agency bit. But those were also the same periods when I got to spend a lot more time with my daughters, one who's going to potentially leave the nest the next year.
Yeah.
That's been like wonderful time spent, very meaningful, high quality. But because there's no goal or box to tick, it doesn't seem to count.
Suddenly, yeah. Oh, but it does count, right? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I'm sure the family and you would appreciate it so much more as well in the longer term, which is what really brings me to, we have these processes in terms of setting goals. But is that really necessary, firstly? And when you do it, what really is the right way to go about it? Like, I set a goal with the intent, the full intent that I hope to kind of achieve it for the next 12 months. But sometimes some of them are not compelling enough. Like right now, for me, being an open water diver is, I don't know if I'd call it a goal as much as a wish. And I know it'll happen. And that's why maybe when I do it, I'll not be so happy again. So if I had to go about being happy about it, how do I really kind of, deconstruct that thought process?
No, I think it does need a bit of deconstructing. And I was listening to Huberman Lab, and it can be quite heavy, but I'm liking his style and the whole kind of neuroscience behind a lot of things that we do. Because most of us, what we are pros at is the behavioral science, right? Like we
Yeah.
know the tools, the frameworks, we know the do's and don'ts. But when you combine it with neuroscience like he does, it's quite enlightening. And actually, in his talk on goal setting, it took a very different path. He was talking about how there's fundamentally the goal setting phase, and then there's the pursuit of the goal, let's call it, like, how do you assess it, how do you execute, which we feel like we know a lot about, but anyway, turns out that we don't. We'll come to that. But one very interesting aspect of the whole neural bit was that most goals we actually set to avoid the thing we fear.
Okay, that's interesting. I would have thought it's the other way around, right? Like, do we not set goals with the intent of achieving a certain amount of pleasure from having accomplished them? Like, in my mind, that makes more logical sense than the fear component.
Yeah, it does, right? But apparently the science, and this is true research at a lot of the top universities, where they're looking at, I think, brain patterns, your blood pressure, various, body parameters, to say that where we really want to kind of get things done is when we want to avoid something we fear. So I fear that I will get diabetes like my mother, so I'm thinking about fitness, right? I fear that I won't get that promotion because I'm not communicating well enough, or I'm not assertive enough at work, and so I build some goals around that. I fear that I'll be left behind, or I'll be embarrassed in a meeting because I don't know enough about something, right? So apparently it sounds like a very negative approach, but I think all that he's saying is that the underlying driver, more often than not, tends to be that. So while you may think I'm doing this because I want a promotion, in a way, I'm doing this because I don't want to be left behind in that batch.
That sounds like a very interesting thing, because now we have to find a fear about not being published authors. And I don't know if we have a fear about that as such. So we better get really, really scared about not getting invited to the Lit Fest next year.
That's an indication of how ready we are for it and how much it really means to us, right? There's definitely a fear that if I look at it that way, there could be there is a fear that what if I don't have a large enough and thriving enough coaching business end of next year, right? What would that mean to my use of my time, my love for the space, monetarily, etc. That's enough of a driver to set 4-5 goals for the coming year, right?
Makes sense. Yeah.
But the book is still the driver is still not strong enough, and so I have to think about what it means if that book is so important to, let's say, my credibility in this space, or it's so important to just my need to put all of my thoughts in one place. And impact X number of people, then maybe it's a better driver.
It could become a reality. Yeah. But also in the context of what you just said, is it necessary for goals then to be on the action side of things? And what I mean by that is, I feel like some of us really need to set goals around doing less in life. Calling myself out is guilty there. But how would I articulate something like that? So this is where we are, and we've had a very successful run as an agency. But the fact also is that it's taken its toll on in terms of my emotional health, right? And that's why we're like so keen and eager to kind of wrap up operations and look forward to the next year. But I think the niggling fear is that next year is also going to look like this year, right? So if we had to work with something like that in terms of paring back, cutting down, and I think this applies professionally, personally, and in all the other areas that you've spoken about as well, what could goals around not doing something look like?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think, there's for you, there was, let's say, that long arching goal of kind of, Hasita 2.0 in the form of Motley Crue. And I set up an agency, I set up a business. And then that ideally should have been certain milestones, which is like, X clients by Q1, X clients by Q2, etc. And then, you periodically assess where you are and say, hey, by 6 months into this business, I was to be at, let's say, 20 clients, but I'm at 35. So I can now say, hey, the little bit of the time that I'm taking off to go diving or, to just swim more, even on a daily basis, it's part of my reward schedule. It's allowed.
Interesting. The funny thing is I had not thought about rewards at all. Because the achievement of the goal, I think, is usually touted as the reward in and of itself, right? So I had not actually thought of the fact that there is the reward step in there somewhere, and how do you celebrate? I mean, is it like a one-time thing? Do you go out, have a lunch, or is there a way to really incorporate rewarding yourself into your daily schedule as well?
Once you have a team, the gestures matter too, right? So the lunches and ordering in some ice cream and all of that is as you hit small and big milestones. I think that's always important. After our Spotify Wrapped, we all went out for
celebrated,
ice cream. Like that's you need to do those little things. But I think what's also important is that you then say, okay, I can recalibrate some of the stuff I'm doing. If I was to hit 20 clients, I made that was part of a plan, right? And now I've hit 35. Now I should be able to then say, okay, I can go a little bit slower this month on the cold calling or the BD efforts and spend a little more time maybe researching something or working on some OpenAI chat stuff and whatever that will contribute still maybe to the work that I do or my own wellness and health, etc. But allow yourself to say, hey, I've hit certain milestones. That was the whole point. I mean, what's the whole point of these SMART goals, etc., that we could measure? So if you measure and you've hit it, then do something about it.
Yeah, so true. I mean, somebody needs to tell us this. Like, can we add something next to SMART to tell us to remember to celebrate? But speaking of SMART goals and ABC goals, and I know that these are time-tested frameworks.
I'm going to stop you there because, something that I heard Huberman say, which I didn't know. And he was actually saying how there are so many acronyms that SMART also, it's been kind of to meet the times. It's now smarter. So they've added an E and an R.
Oh, interesting.
The E is whether it's ethical, the goal that you're setting.
Fair
and
enough.
The R is whether it's rewarding, right? So
interesting.
The rewarding could be like, rewarding for the world and good thing to do. And
that in and of itself, that in and of itself could be a goal, right? Like all of us are driven by different things. And if changing the world is a reward, then I mean, by all means. But just coming back to, I think, the frameworks, right? Specific, measurable, actionable. I forgot what R is, time bound. Okay. Do you still see value in some of these, given that the conversation around goals has now moved into a space of neurobiology, if I could put it that way? And maybe what you're saying is that even the earliest man, in that sense, probably had some goals. And I can see why they would be fear-driven, in the sense that I've invented tools so that I don't have to be afraid of being hungry, right? So in that context, do you still see the relevance of some of these frameworks, or is it just a lifestyle choice, the setting and the achieving and the rewarding ourselves for goals? Is that a more organic process?
So I think the SMART and all of these frameworks are just one part of the larger scheme of things, right? When we talk about the whole goal setting and pursuing of these goals, firstly, like, what are they? We talked about the areas of our life that they could touch upon. How challenging are they, right? Here again, it shouldn't be something that you're repeatedly failing at, right? It's something that has a moderate, reasonable chance of success, right? And the number apparently is 85%. Like 85% of the time you should be able to do what you're intending to do, right?
Interesting.
15% failure is good. If you're failing 50% of the time, then you want to rethink whether that's really too much of a stretch in terms of what you can achieve. Then comes the planning piece. Okay, I've got these bunch of things that seem like what I want to achieve. Then comes the planning, and then the detailing. Is it smart? Is it smarter? Is it achievable, believable? Am I committed to it? The ABC of it, etc. The next part, which I really found interesting, was that you would think that a lot of this is about that visualizing success and being
True. In fact, that is so true, right? I mean, vision boards exist for that very purpose. And I think much and more has been said about just the idea of visualizing and letting it go and, manifesting your success. And somewhere I have also felt that in not articulating it, perhaps I've achieved more success than I had, because I think the fear there is, if I set a goal and fail at it, then I'm a failure. Maybe that could be, an internal driver as well.
Yeah.
So in that context, but what you're telling me now is that it's not so much that, right? It's more about also taking charge of it and ownership.
Correct. And it seems that, folks have more than a 50% higher success rate when you foreshadow failure, right? So the visualizing success is great in the beginning, right? So it's great when you imagine yourself, on that stage, maybe getting that Oscar or that Nobel Prize or whatever your equivalent is, right? So in that early stage, it's very useful. But once it becomes something that you want and you want to see happen, then foreshadowing failure and saying, okay, what would happen if this didn't happen? What all could go wrong? And hence, what all do I need to do about it?
That's interesting.
Apparently gives a much higher chance of goal achievement. And you want to think about that and use that in the way I look at some of the goals this year. Because, for example, visualizing success has always been how I thought I could get more intentional and make more headway in fitness goal, right? So I'm visualizing myself running some marathon where honestly I'm not getting past the start line, right? I keep visualizing that and nothing much is happening. But when I read this and when I heard him talk about foreshadowing failure, and I thought, hey, I have my college girls gang reunion like 6-7 months from now, and not looking the way I want to for those photos and not wanting to be in those photos because I don't feel healthy or fit enough, that's a very strong driver. And that kind of thinking about what could go wrong.
I'll
be able to do a lot more of that when I visualize it this way.
That's quite interesting. I think that's the one thing I've always run away from in any case, in terms of visualizing the worst case scenario. But I do see the value in it, in the sense that on the toughest of days, what keeps you going, right? And that's survival, I think, because we are all essentially, biologically still in the Stone Age. It's just that we are living in a different world, enabled by different machines right now. So that makes a lot of sense, I think. So I'll set aside my SMART framework for a while. I'm sure we'll get to that. But maybe it's really time for me to think about what are the 2-3 things that I really, really want, and what happens if I don't have them.
No, and I'm glad you said 2-3, because I think trying too many things also is is a bit of a recipe for disaster and disappointment. 2 to 3 seems like a good number to do it with the intentionality and intensity that you would want to, right?
True,
Finally,
makes
what is the
sense.
value that you're getting from the goal, and hence what are you going to do, what are you going to not do is important. And just to wrap it up, we talked a lot about failure, what could go wrong, what are the things we fear. So it's not really about thinking about doomsday, but
Yeah.
it's just another perspective, because every time there's a lot out there about being positive and visualizing success and manifesting it. I mean, not to take away from any of that, and this is also not to say, like, just keep imagining death and then
Assume the
doing
worst.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's about finding that balance. You're right, because the same Instagram scrolling, doom scrolling, can feel like doom scrolling on some days, and then on the other days, you feel positive. You feel like, okay, I can also have this. I can also. So yeah, I've had, it's all a state of mind really, and maybe goal setting is no different as well.
Yeah, so maybe this year we just try it a little differently, and
Yeah.
looking at fears and looking at failures as much as we look at what success looks like, and more importantly, how do we reward ourselves for that success.
So importantly, let's start with the rewarding ourselves, I think.
Sounds good. Catch you next
Thank
time.
you.
Bye. Hey, small talkers. Thank you for listening till the very end. We love bringing these episodes to you, and we hope you enjoy them too. Please do drop in your comments, likes, shares, reviews, whatever you can do on the platform that you're on to help us reach a larger and larger audience. And that would really make our day. You can find out more about today's guest or today's episode in the show notes. All the details and how you can find us on social media is right there. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye.